Hi, I'm Bill Fox again with Las Cruces Public Schools TV. And today we're going to sit down with Amy Himelright. She's the Director of Mental Health and Academic Counseling. I want to get that right. Did I get that right, Amy?
You did.
Director of Mental Health and Academic Counseling for Las Cruces Public Schools. I was reading the paper last Sunday and I ran across your op-ed about the conversation cafes. And it got me thinking about the challenges that a lot of our parents are facing through the lockdowns. Started doing a little research and I found a study from the University of Michigan that found that early on, back April and May, about half the parents surveyed said that they felt like they were ready to facilitate online learning for their students. And then, of course, that means 50% felt overwhelmed with the idea. And they found that as it's gone on, the number of parents that respond saying they feel prepared has been going down, while the number of parents that report feeling overwhelmed has greatly gone up. And when I saw the op-ed about the conversation cafes, I thought this would be a perfect time to talk to you about just that. They cite in the study that some of the concerns that the parents were starting to mention when asked, they said that they were seeing the big problems were disruptions to the daily lives of their students, of course, which includes things like social isolation, lack of physical activity, stress, changes in routines, kind of the things that you don't think of when you think of a proper school classroom, the reading, writing, and arithmetic. And I've heard mentioned social and emotional learning. Are we kind of on the same page there? Is that what we're talking about when we talk about those kinds of stressors?
So first of all, thanks for inviting me to talk about this today. It's obviously a passion area of mine, and this is the work that I do in Las Cruces Public Schools with our kids and families. And you're exactly right, Bill. What you're talking about well, first of all, let me back up because you just talked about a lot of things. I want to validate that for our students and for their parents, life has just changed so suddenly and so dramatically over the course of the last 8 months. And nobody really knows that better than me, because not only am I a full-time employee of the school district, but I'm a parent of 3 high school students myself. So those things that you just talked about as far as disrupted sleep routines, eating routines, perhaps in some cases less physical activity and social isolation are all things that that I myself am kind of helping my family navigate at the same time that all of our parents with students in the district are. So I really have a lot of empathy and understanding for how difficult that's been. And I hadn't seen the study that you mentioned, but it makes sense to me that as time goes on, the longer this goes on, the more those things really become a stressor for our students and their parents. Kind of moving into all of a sudden, parents are the primary facilitator of their child's education. We have teachers still creating the curriculum and teaching online, but suddenly parents are in this new role of being facilitator to their child's learning. And then when you think about that in a larger context, we're not just talking about academic skills. Again, going back to some of the things you just mentioned, we're talking about physical education, and we're talking about social emotional learning, which social emotional learning is not something new. Historically, we've heard terms such as whole child education, soft skills. Emotional IQ was a term that kind of came out in the 90s. So all of this has been kind of an evolution of what do kids need to learn besides academic skills in order to best access education and really be successful in relationships, in career, and in life. And so we're now calling that social emotional learning. So we were already, as a school district, making efforts to teach social emotional learning. And I want to kind of talk about that just briefly, like why is that important? We're kind of born with some basic emotions: surprise, happy, sad. Those things are innate, but all more complex emotions such as humility, empathy, compassion. These are things that really have to be developed and that can be practiced and learned. And so in the schools, we have for the last couple of years had very systemic social emotional learning curricula that we're using to teach kids these higher level kind of emotional IQ, self-management strategies and skills, these non-academic skills. So that was important pre-pandemic. Fast forward to today, and kiddos are dealing with, with the social isolation, with all of the stressors that come along with the pandemic, and we're still teaching some social emotional learning online. But again, parents are now our frontline educational facilitator. So suddenly they're the ones that may be faced with a child's like extreme frustration over technology not working, or frustration over not understanding Canvas, or a lack of kind of sense of self-efficacy, or a belief that like I can do this. A lot online learning is a huge shift, and it's hard for a lot of kids. And so now the parent is the one at home kind of trying to help kiddos overcome this sense of overwhelm, perfectionism, apathy, all of these difficult kind of emotions that can really get in the way of accessing education and academic skills. So I know that was a lot of information, but I hope that I'm kind of highlighting the intersection of academic skills that need to be taught and practiced, and emotional skills that need to be taught and practiced. And kind of the point that we were already working on this in school. Now we're remote and we're still working on this, but we really acknowledge that parents are on the front lines, and we want to equip them with skills to help their children further develop emotional competencies.
Well, then that makes sense. Then the conversation cafes, I guess I take it, are that's an avenue into giving parents the toolbox that they need, because you talk about a lot of those things, and I it didn't even register to me that we were teaching those things in class. I mean, modeling maybe, but when you talk about them and break them down into specifics, like one of the ones that really made my ears perk up was perfectionism. You don't really think about, I see it when I go into a classroom. I see students that get frustrated when they can't get something exactly right. I help teach editing, and they get so frustrated when they can't get the program to work, or they can't get the exact shot they want. You don't really see, as a parent, you don't really have to deal with that kind of level of frustration at home. I mean, they may get frustrated that they can't play a game right, or they work on their jump shot, or they want to get their scales right in music. But you don't think of, as a parent, of it's just kind of day to day. Whereas in a classroom, teachers have to have a strategy to deal with those things, and you don't really think about that as a layperson.
Right, that's exactly right. And so we're starting to teach teachers the skills to help children manage those difficult emotions, and remembering that these things don't exist separate from academic success. Perfectionism can be absolutely, just as one example, debilitating to succeeding. And so whereas before we may have had teachers and counselors and administrators and all kinds of helpful folks at school to help a child kind of overcome difficult emotions like that in order to access their learning and their academic success, parents may be finding themselves having to do a lot more of that on their own at home. So that's why we did want to create a support space for parents so that we could kind of help not just support them, but also like teach them and educate them, because there are evidence-based kind of strategies and techniques that we can use to help kiddos with things like tolerating frustration. Again, online learning, we're going to validate, can be very frustrating. We can teach skills to help children become more aware of what they're feeling when they're feeling it. That's actually the definition of emotional IQ, and skills to help them then manage those feelings. We can teach skills to help increase self-control, and for better responsible decision making and sense of responsibility toward others, social awareness. So all throughout history, so this is also evidence-based, like children do better throughout life into adolescence, into adulthood, when these things are kind of being taught and modeled at home. So it's always been important that these social emotional competencies be taught and modeled at home. But again, up until now, we've had that balance. Parents have had that built-in support network of other caring adults coming into contact with their kiddos every day, also helping to develop those emotional competencies. So knowing that some of that is diminished in the pandemic, we hope that through the conversation cafes with parents, we can just really increase parents' confidence and skill set in helping their kiddos develop and practice these social and emotional competencies.
I noticed that there's 5 sessions in for English speakers and 5 sessions for Spanish speakers, which is awesome. Is the content going to be the same in each?
Right, so there's 5, there'll be 5 sessions. Each session will kind of tackle a different area of social emotional learning and competence. And they will be held, the sessions will be held in English 5 times, and then the same sessions will also be held in Spanish 5 times. So they're available for our parents, both that prefer English and those that prefer Spanish. And we really encourage parents to sign up for 1 or 2 or all 5. So the content does not repeat, and it's not progressive in that you don't have to have been at 1 and 2 to attend session 3. So just really want parents to sign up for as many as they might like.
You answered the question before I even asked it, but you raised another question. You did say that you ask that parents sign up. Is there a registration there? You're asking parents to register in advance. Is that the case?
Yes. So the conversation cafes are being held via Zoom. So they are virtual. They're virtual gatherings. By registering in advance, we can collect some information so that we can get parents the exact days, times, and the Zoom link invitation to the meeting. Additionally, when parents register in advance, we have some special resource guides. We have some ebooks that we're emailing out to parents. And so all of that kind of is facilitated through the registration process. And if you don't mind, Bill, I'll share with you quickly the link to register. But then I also want folks to know they can find it by going to the Las Cruces Public Schools website. If you scroll down just a little bit, there's an article on conversation cafes, and this link is also posted there. But there it is. So the link is https, the colon, I believe it's called, // bit.ly. So it's a bit.ly address, bit.ly /LCPS conversation cafes. Parents can register there. Again, I don't expect everybody to get that just from this conversation. So that's also available on the LCPS website when you click on the article on conversation cafes.
I was grossly underprepared. Can you repeat that one more time now that I have my pen in hand so I can write that down? And we'll put it in links, additional links with the conversation that we're having. So I got the www.//
Well, it's not, yeah. Okay, bit.ly, so bit.ly /LCPS conversation cafes, all one word.
Perfect. Okay. I don't have kids, but I won't sign up and take somebody else's spot, but maybe after the fact we can figure out a way to provide the information on a wider basis.
Absolutely.
That comes out of the cafes. Speaking of providing the information, I know that the school district has taken this very seriously. I know you are. Last time I talked to Josh Silver and Matt Dawkins about IT, those guys are super busy. If there maybe is one person more busy in this district than they are, I know how busy you are, because this is a big concern for us on top of everything else. Making sure our children and our families are in a good space to learn is just as important as providing the content for them to learn. Are there other resources available for parents that are feeling overwhelmed or that are starting to feel this becoming a bit too much?
Right. So you bring up a really important point, and I appreciate that. Because all of the things I'm talking about as far as self-efficacy and self-control and emotional IQ, all of those things are very important, but none of that can exist if some more foundational needs are not being met. And we know that that's also a huge area of concern during the always, but especially during the pandemic for our kiddos. So we have compiled a very extensive resource guide for our families, and we have community resources available for everything from housing to utility assistance to food assistance to medical care, dental care. We really do know and acknowledge that if those basic needs are not being met for our children and families, then of course learning and higher kind of we call it self-actualization, like higher levels of emotional development aren't happening. So we this resource guide is very comprehensive. It can connect families to lots of community partners, and it can also be found on our website, on the Las Cruces Public Schools website. There's a there's a button for our COVID kind of action plan. It's pretty evident right near the top. And when parents click on that button, then there's a second button they can click on that says community resources. And that's where our very extensive community resource guide can be found.
Perfect. Well, with the holidays coming up, I hope that as a mother and as a professional, you get a little bit of downtime. What would you recommend to parents and everybody, students, parents, staff? You have any recommendations, something they can do over the holidays just to kind of try to regroup, because this is going to go on into next semester. So we don't know how long, but we do know that it's going to go on. So what could you offer? What kind of advice?
I absolutely have a couple of recommendations. The first being, and this is important, be kind and gentle with yourselves. Give yourself some grace and some leniency. Parents, like things do look different right now, and it's okay. Your kiddos' sleep patterns are going to be a little wonky. Their eating patterns are going to be a little wonky. They may be more agitated, more irritable than normal, and all of that is to be expected during this really unprecedented time. And so try to be kind and gentle with yourself. It is important that we establish some normal patterns of sleep, but that normal doesn't have to look any particular way or like it did pre-pandemic. So, get good sleep, try to eat, get outside as best you can. Parents, the more you do this yourselves, the more your kiddos are likely to do it. It's that saying, like, they do as we do, not as we say. So get outside together as a family and just really spend some time connecting with one another. And that can be difficult. But we can create space that kind of allows for it to happen naturally. So if you're able, cook some meals together, go for some drives together, sit down and eat once or twice a day together, technology and distraction free. And just be available, be open, and to listen and connect with your kiddos. That's so important. And finally, I talked a little bit about things are wonky, and that's to be expected. But also, like, listen to your gut, parents. So if you have some big red flags, for your kiddo, if they're just sleeping way more than you think is normal for them, or way less, or if they seem if their level of conflict with peers or with family is very, very elevated, if they have extended periods of sadness or hopelessness, then don't hesitate ever to reach out and ask for help, because those might be signs that something a little more serious than just COVID blues is going on. And your school counselors and social workers are certainly available to help with that, as well as other resources that can be found, again, in our community resource guide. I hope that wasn't too long-winded, Bill.
No, and the only problem with it is it raises so many more topics for discussion. But for today, I want to say thank you, Amy Himelright, Director of Mental Health and Academic Counseling for Las Cruces Public Schools. I have a feeling this won't be our last conversation, because just that got me thinking about a dozen other conversations that we could have. And I look forward to maybe sitting down with you in the future and talking to you about some of those things as well in the new year.
Anytime. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you for spending some time with me today, Amy.